United Nations, Indonesia and the Netherlands, France and its allies, South Vietnam and North Vietnam, South Korea and North Korea. And there was starvation for 1/3 of the world. But this was the world John Kennedy had elected to face, and the people of his country had elected him to face it. And so the pickets marched, and Washington, D.C. could see them. And as they marched, the president was drafting the 6 faces of the new frontier inside the gates of the White House. The Peace Corps, the conquest of space, an alliance for progress, civil rights, freedom and peace were the 6 faces of the new frontier.
There can be no greater service to our country and no source of pride more real than to be a member of the Peace Corps of the United States.
And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it. We mean to lead it.
That's what the Alliance for Progress means, to provide progress, revolutionary progress, through peaceful democratic means. I think it can be done. I think we set out on an important journey.
In too many parts of the country, wrongs are inflicted on Negro citizens, and there are no remedies at law. Unless the Congress acts, their only remedy is the street. That no free nation can retain any illusions about the nature of the threat, and that no free nation can remain indifferent to the steady erosion of freedom around the globe. We do not believe that war is unavoidable or that negotiations are inherently undesirable. We do believe that an end to the arms race is in the interests of all.
But there were those who disagreed with the president, those who laughed at the Peace Corps, those who said there was no reason to go to the moon, those who said the Alliance for Progress would fail, those who said there could be no integration of the races, those who said communism could not hurt freedom, and those who said there was no hope of a lasting peace. But perhaps man is at times dominated by the things he could see the clearest and hear the loudest, while the uncommon man is not so preoccupied with sight and sound. Instead, he thinks in terms of the invisible and silent. He thinks of compassion, which is invisible and silent. He thinks of peace, which is invisible and silent. Not war, with its bright flames and explosive roars. Not oppression, with unions and the hammering together of a wall. John Kennedy was that uncommon man, and so he built his new frontier in an uncommon manner, around the conference tables of the United Nations, on the streets of Alabama, beside the citizens of West Berlin, in the villages of Tanganyika, under the towers of Cape Canaveral, and through the halls of Congress. Each was given a part of 2 years and 10 months. The first face of the new frontier spoke of an enemy that lived on the streets of overpopulated cities and underdeveloped countries. Its name was starvation and poverty and illiteracy and disease. The ruins this enemy left behind did not smolder or smell of charred buildings, but there were the cries of infants and the parched lips of old men and women. In the streets of cities and the huts of villages, misery was a common bond that grew tighter through the years. And so economists added, but populations multiplied. As a road was built to one village, 2 new villages had formed. As a disease became controlled in one community, parted with over $100 billion of foreign assistance. Now he proposed 2 additional burdens on their economy and conscience, an alliance for progress to help build the economy of all Central and South America, and a Peace Corps to be transported. The United States answered the president and accepted the 2 new burdens he proposed. As the Alliance for Progress was starting, the president requested to speak to the first Peace Corps volunteers at the Rose Garden of the White House.
I feel a particular satisfaction because this is the most immediate response, the Peace Corps, that I think the country has seen to the whole spirit which I tried to suggest in my inaugural,
about the contribution which we could make to our country. The fact that you've been willing to volunteer, that you've gone through very detailed, demanding tests, that you were willing to go to Ghana and Tanganyika and other countries as time goes on, Americans who are without great compensation, all of you with special skills, which could mean that if you stayed home, you could pursue your own private interest with a good deal of assurance of success. The fact that you're willing to do this for our country and in a larger sense, as the name suggests, for the cause of peace and understanding, I think should make all Americans proud and make them all appreciative. Thank you.
And so the Peace Corps volunteers were to leave their country to go any place in the world that needed them and requested them. And the first group went to the Philippines, to Ecuador, and to Tanganyika. And the army came, without guns and without uniforms, not to destroy, but to build, not to demand, but to teach, not to take over the weak, but to leave behind the strong. Their job was to teach others to teach themselves, so that in the future there would be no need for a Peace Corps anywhere on Earth. So in the future, every country could develop its own resources without help. And while the Peace Corps was starting in Africa and Asia, the Alliance for Progress was mushrooming in Latin America.
I'm heartened by the advances that have been made in this short space of time. A peaceful revolution is underway in Latin America, one that gives promise of bringing a better life throughout the continent. The Alliance is a cooperative effort of unparalleled dimensions. It seeks to destroy the ancient enemies of poverty and disease and hunger and ignorance and bring about, by peaceful and democratic means, a new climate of hope and opportunity. The advances made in these first 2 years are only a start. Some 140,000 housing units have been constructed. Slum clearance projects have begun. There are 8,200 new classrooms. More than 4 million school books have been distributed. More than 9 million children are being fed in 18 Latin American countries under a Food for Peace program. Road construction, especially in some agricultural areas, is proceeding at a rapid pace. All this is a beginning. It's my hope that the governments of this hemisphere, including the government of the United States, that all of us will continue to work closely together to provide a better life for all of our people. I think it's a journey that must be finished. To the completion of that journey, I pledge the people of the United States.
citizens of Mexico and Central and South America were visited by the president as he brought the alliance to the doorstep of their countries.
Let me say, gracias. Lady, let me just say, I want to express the thanks of all of us to you for having us here today. Occasionally, universities are regarded as dangerous places for presidents, and we are grateful to you for your warm welcome to all of us on this occasion. Every one of us will go home with the most profound impression of what a strong, vital people can accomplish. And I think that this journey to Costa Rica has illuminated the minds of 180 million people of what a great opportunity and privilege we have to be associated together in our common cause. Viva Costa Rica, arriba Costa Rica, muchas gracias.
The Alliance for Progress had been planted, and its fruits were beginning to be seen. The Peace Corps was born and had matured at an early age. But no longer would the Alliance or the Peace Corps see their inventor, for the president would never again stand on the soil of Latin America. The Alliance and Peace Corps did not die with John Kennedy. They grew as President Johnson reinforced them, as he would also do in the field of civil rights. How much time would it take? How many years to complete equality? Almost 100 years before President Kennedy's inauguration, a civil war had been fought, and President Lincoln had signed a proclamation granting freedom to all Negroes in the United States. When the war was won, amendments to the Constitution guaranteed the Negroes equality. Why then was this still a matter of discontent 100 years later? In the 11 southern states, there were still segregated schools reserved for one race only, where Negroes attended with Negroes. There was still segregated housing with large districts restricted to one race only, where Negroes lived next door to Negroes. The Negro had only 1/3 the opportunity of a white American to become a doctor, 1/3 the opportunity for a Negro to become a lawyer or to become a business executive. Only 1/3 the opportunity for him to become a candidate for public election. Why, in the autumn of 1957, did President Eisenhower have to send troops to Little Rock to ensure the safe entrance of Negroes into a white enrolled school? Why was it necessary for soldiers to accompany them inside the doorways? Why was all this true? States' rights was a voice from the South. The federal government can't tell the states how to run their business. And a voice said, Negroes don't have the education for an equal job. And still another voice said, some of my best friends are Negroes, but you can't force me to go to school with them. And so it went for 100 years, 100 voices with 100 excuses. But the word that very few spoke, and the word with perhaps the greatest truth, was the word prejudice. And most of the United States knew there was prejudice and wanted it to end. But even as the signs came down, the prejudice did not end. And so in 1962, President Kennedy had to call on federal troops, this time to Mississippi, to ensure the admittance of a qualified Negro, James Meredith, to the state university. Above violence and disorder, James Meredith was admitted.
If an American, because his skin is dark, cannot enjoy the full and free life which all of us want, then who among us would be content to have the color of his skin changed and stand in his place? Now the time has come for this nation to fulfill its promise. The events in Birmingham and elsewhere have so increased the cries for equality that no city or state or legislative body can prudently choose to ignore them. The fires of frustration and discord are burning in every city, in demonstrations, parades, and protests, which create tensions and threaten violence and threaten lives. A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all.
And so came the Freedom Riders, busloads of Negro and white citizens headed south to have their voices and their very presence heard. State to state, there would be no segregation in the terminals or the waiting rooms, whether in New York State or Louisiana. There was no pay for a Freedom Rider, and there were no heroes or heroines aboard the buses. Their names were as unimportant as their creed or color. They were, most important of all, citizens of the country. Buses rode day and night with their destinations of Birmingham or Jackson or Fayetteville promised by morning. On August 28, 1963, the buses had a new destination. With the morning sun would come the image of the Washington Monument, the Lincoln Memorial, and the White House. The destination, Washington, D.C. The Constitution guaranteed the right of peaceful assembly, and 200,000 people from all over the country poured into Washington on August the 28th. President Kennedy met on that day with their organization's leaders to encourage the completion of the revolution, a revolution for complete equality in education, employment, and housing throughout the United States, North and South.
Those who do nothing are inviting shame. Those who act boldly are recognizing right. Next week, I shall ask the Congress of the United States to act, to make a commitment to the proposition that race has no place in American life or law.
In June of 1964, the Congress voted into law President Kennedy's Civil Rights Bill. It was President Lyndon Johnson who guided it through its last months of legislation, and he had requested the Congress to pass the bill as a continuing monument to President Kennedy. In the late 1950s, the ocean of space roared from the impact of Soviet successes. But the United States had barely gotten off the beach. The country late in developing advanced rockets, watched one failure follow another. Out of the headlines of disappointment came a voice of optimism and a voice of promise.
But we do not intend to stay behind, and in this decade we shall make up and move ahead.
From the corrected data of past failures came new successes. And under the commitment of President Kennedy, new and more powerful spacecraft were erected in the towers of Cape Canaveral. As space vehicles became proven, manned flight started. And from the White House, the President with Vice President Johnson watched the first manned launch to be viewed around the world, the launch of Alan Shepard.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want to express on behalf of us all the great pleasure we have in welcoming Commander Shepard and Mrs. Shepard here today. I know that the other members of this team who are astronauts know that our pride in them is equal. They have been part of this effort from the beginning, and I think it does credit to him that he is associated with such a distinguished group of Americans whom we are all glad to honor today, his companions in the flight to outer space. So I think we'll give them all a hand. They are the tanned and healthy ones. The others are Washington employees. I also want to again express my congratulations to Alan Shepard. We're very proud of him, and I speak on behalf of the Vice President, who is chairman of our Space Council and who bears great responsibilities in this field, the members of the House and Senate Space Committee who are with us today, and this decoration, which has gone from the ground up here.
Telstar communication satellites and Tyros weather satellites followed the success of Alan Shepard, as well as other astronauts. Shepard and Grissom came before him. Carpenter, Schirra, and Cooper were to come after him in their Mercury capsules. But on February the 20th, the name was John Glenn, and the capsule was Friendship 7.
set sail on this new scene because there is new knowledge to be gained, and they must be won and used for the progress of all people.
And all people came as the world was once more invited to Cape Canaveral to watch success or failure.
Many years ago, George Mallory, who was to die on Mount Everest, was asked why did he want to climb it. He said, because it is there. Well, space is there, and we're going to climb it. And the moon and the planets are there, and new hopes for knowledge and peace are there. And therefore, as we set sail, we ask God's blessing on the most hazardous and dangerous and greatest adventure on which man has ever embarked.
Away from the beaches off Cape Canaveral, the lone pilot traveled at 17,500 miles an hour.
I regard the decision last year to shift our efforts in space from low to high gear as among the most important decisions that will be made during my incumbency in the office of the presidency. For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond, even though I realize that this is, in some measure, an act of faith and vision, for we do not now know what benefits await us.
Rocketry, which 20 years ago was used to fly in war from Peenemünde, Germany, across the English Channel, was soon to fly in peace to the stars, not from Cape Canaveral, but from Cape Kennedy.